Okay. Hi, everyone, in both the virtual universe and the flesh-id proximal universe. It's good to see you all. Thanks for coming out. So I'm David Hubert. I am acting editor of the Fiddlehead. We have various other Fiddlehead folks here, and we're all really pleased to be able to celebrate the launch of this issue, this latest beautiful issue, winter 2023. First thing I should do is to acknowledge that the land on which the Fiddlehead operates is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik. The territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. So we would like to thank our sponsors, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Government of New Brunswick, UNB, Frostival, Fredericton's annual winter festival, and our launch partner, Word Feast. I'd also like to thank our ASL interpreters with the New Brunswick Deaf and Hard of Hearing Society, who are offering their services via Zoom. And a big shout out to our poet bookseller in residence, Nick Tran, who's selling books and copies right over there through Fredericton's amazing local bookstore, Westminster Books. You, yes, you can buy a copy of the winter issue in person or virtually on our submittable page. And the link to purchase that will be available online in the Zoom chat. We've got a little Westminster Books sort of. Yeah, okay, we got some books over there, great. Okay, so just so you're aware, we're gonna have 4 short readings, and following those readings, we will have a Q&A, so keep your hardballs handy. We would appreciate some questions which will arise from these lovely discussions. Joanne Elder will be monitoring the Zoom room, so she can field questions from our virtual participants, which would be lovely to hear from you as well. Many of our friends of the Fiddlehead out there in the digital universe. Okay, so I'll start by introducing Cody Caetano. Cody Caetano is the author of Half-Bads and White Regalia, and his writing has appeared in the Globe and Mail, the Walrus, Prism International, Hard House Review, and elsewhere. He currently works as a literary agent at Cook McDermott. Cody's wonderful book is for sale right over there in print. And on the link provided in the chat. What I love about Cody's writing is its swagger and agility, line by line, page by page. This book stays funny and fresh and deliriously vivid. Please join me in welcoming Cody.
Cool. So I'm going to stand here. So hi to the 16, including us in the chat. Nice to see everyone. And hi, everyone who's here. Just before I start reading, I just wanted to say thanks to the Fredericton writing community, to Sue, Nick, to Ian, and to David, and everybody who's made me and Matilda feel so welcome here. It's been a really good transition to the city, and I'm a big fan of everything that happens here. The issue is really beautiful. I just got a copy of it, and I'm excited for Tazi and Adèle and to Ellie to be reading with you guys. And yeah, I'm gonna just read really quickly an excerpt from a manuscript in progress that I'm at work on. It's about 2 friends named Bear Flink and Gustave Goose Ducosta. They're 2 Crown Awards. They meet as children through the Big Brothers Big Sisters program in Ontario. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with that. In a little town called Rodeo, spelled like rodeo. As grade 9 starts, the boys begin selling weed in a bush outside of James Yonder Catholic Secondary, and bubbling resentments begin to slowly test their friendship. This excerpt takes place from Bear's perspective as him and Goose wait outside a plaza to get picked up by 2 stooges like Corey and Trevor. If you see Trailer Park Boys, like kind of guys like that. Bear's interior, just as a warning, it riffs off the world around him. He's kind of like a Tony Lone Man or a Ricky from Trailer Park Boys, or the former from There. Right, so Goose and I showed up on fucking time to meet Maz and Jay Bird outside the Little Caesars on King, simply chilling maybe 10 past 8 with a hot and ready takeaway, and fucker texted me running late, and I thought shit sakes because the waited on may never come. And even if the waited on do eventually make it, they aren't always worth the time wasted, and fate would fucking have it, okay? Moons ago, I heard a story in Cush Bush about a compound on a stump by the picnic benches after a long one. Apparently, old boy Kerr, who owned an auto shop on the brink of Rodeo, had a brother, houseless or just out of the bin or saddle for some other reason, who endured his days scanning the beachfront with a metal detector. Known story goes, Kerr let him in the property for across the shop and jockey for tin until he picked him up after his shift. Apparently, brother kept to himself and spent his days along the shore and lived that way till rumors milled around that Marty Brunswick, there's no coincidence, it's just his last name, a truck full of punk butchers and fighting boys drove out to the compound late one night last summer to beat the fill-ins out of him, and did so unscathed, left the brother wriggling on the dirt floor as they hollered away with another story to get laid. Said they couldn't find him after they swung by again at the end of August, and nobody had seen him on the beach since. I never knew which part of Marty's stories to believe or not, so Goose and I wanted to see for ourselves, or so I thought. We crushed the first takeaway, and another standing there on the curb, hugging our burning and foolish stomachs right before an inbound mission, thinking about how to proceed and not about all the missions crushed. And so out loud, Goose wondered again about Cortana and what she's going to do with Gravemine all that time. So Bungie hurried up and made another Halo game. And I thought hopefully not fucking standing around King's Plaza waiting for a Civic, eh? But I knew Buddy's content's under pressure when he starts talking hush thoughts. Even though Marty told us nobody's stumbling around Kerr's on a summer weeknight now, and I wouldn't let shit happen even if someone was, you know what I'm saying? And maybe it was a breeze off Highway 11's wind tunnel, or the thought of the drive ahead that had Goose rattling and showcasing his brain to me like it wasn't hot enough for the t-shirt and shorts he wore that summer day. But either way, he's just going on about taking his G1, which is the F in Ontario, and how much money he had saved in the bank from the dish pit, and bringing Jump to the Dunk with Tiger, which is his foster dad. And I wish I had some beer, wish I had some wheels there, and yada, 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 about tig old Dana Belfry when Maz's fucking bullet gray whip shot from the highway into the parking lot, right as the sun dipped above the plaza and crowned the tall ones off Cush behind it. Gravel rumbling dangerously loud because of some late asses in a dusty Honda with DC shoe stickers all over like a goddamn matter binder. But neither Goose or me could take the field too full much longer. So in the back, we go driving buckled all the way up a limb. Okay, so that whole ride, right? And shotgun or not, every time I'm a passenger to someone else's driving, really, even just for a couple minutes, pit stop, right? I think about what it feels like to drive. And at that moment, I wondered if Goose or anyone else out there without driving credentials ever thought about it this way. You know, most people who drive treat the whip like another limb or privilege owed at birth. And when it's time to drive and their eyes hit the road, it's so what? But to me, it's all about how driving connects the arms and feet to a juice box of speed and motion as the car peels across 11 and rips out of Ontario, all the way past Rodeo and up through the Algonquin, passing all those National Geographic stunting-ass cliffs, and slowing down to see the sandbars and bunting along those cottage lots until it's so wide and empty and big that whole slabs of the earth or sky could switch places right there in the open and free boonies, and no Vin Diesel domo is taking note or knowing what up. Mind the grateful who keeps on driving, takes the highway over to Manitoba and skirts along the provincial border to the Interlake, stopping to take pictures and fish in rivers and waterbeds in a canoe tied onto the roof of an off-road Tacoma that gets kept top shape and polished, and make sure to flatten out the back seats and watch the starlights dot the canopy. And I don't even know what the fuck a canopy is, but I like the way it sounds right there, right? Almost like Buddy's asking to piss, or for a can of peas, how it feels coming into my head right there. And if there's one out there somewhere, I bet I could find it if I only knew how to drive. It's not even just about the distance that passes, but the physical sensation of sitting in the driver's seat, how fast those Hot Wheels travel, and how easily the pressure of a foot is gifted out after a couple tests any dumbass could pass no problem. It's also how the dumbass is still just as likely to get into a car crash and leave dead on the scene, probably undo some lives into horrific, fiery goo, pulling out the sausage links of their guts onto the infinitely pounded on and drab gravel. And even if dumbass gets in trouble, if he's rich and he's connected enough, he could just buy his time. But a bear or a goose can't buy shit like time. And even if we could, we're still just two dudes wondering if the people driving along 11 are as stupid and reckless as we thought they were. Maybe that's just me, right? Maz asks us both sup and goes saying, and the first thing after the fist bumps and settling in is to let them know I need a weapon. So I do, just like Chief. And with that, Goose knew I was referencing Johnny 117, but he didn't know that this mission would require a weapon, which I guess I never told him we need out there, but sometimes you don't tell your buddy something because it's easier not to shake a shaker if he's already prone to shake it. And of course, Goose won't say whatever he's actually thinking. So naturally, he's just asking for the aux cord, putting on some Billy Talent like that's the right thing to put on then. But we all heard from Goose first and then 4 times, and even Jaybird too about this one song they put out the other day. So Maz cranks it nice and loud, and Goose gets singing and moshing with his seatbelt on. And then he gets unbuckled and starts bopping in the back, clowning us with unhelpful, whack energy. On the outskirts of Rodeo, just past the Zeller's Canadian Tire and the crumbling shopping mall, we took a thin strip of road and mowed all the way to the north side of the lake. And keep in mind that nobody went out that way unless their parents got a divorce and the one who wanted it more began fucking some rich ass, and Buddy's going there on weekends and he's got to plug ears come bedtime and try not to cry. But Max had a guy in his shop class whose auntie he moved in with who done just that. And Buddy took Max for a ride to that line, And from there, Max spotted this guy's auto shop and off he went to Marty like that. And told me he's standing there, right, Ishka? Max said, fucking Kangol with a spiky collar just drooling. Only this one's mad tall, posted up near the chest, all cranked out and pissed. You're just making shit up, I said. There's no fucking dog sitting out there right now, grrring at the wind and shit. Suit your bones frozen, Flintstone. About then we made it to those back roads and ghosted up a side street off some line. Can't remember which, but sometime after 2 or 3 sweeps of Forest Street, Maz parked out about 5 minutes from the compound, right off Division Road in a line named after a Debbie. Brush above cut up the moon in pieces. And Jaybird hands Goose a flashlight, still good since the last time a bunch of us went out late somewhere, and motions for him and I to get the fuck out of his car and start walking. But Goose just passes me the light and looks out his window toward the moon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Cody. How wonderful to see and hear some of your new work emerging. That was really exciting. Yeah, what a performance as well. Okay, next I'd like to introduce Adèle Barclay. Adèle is the author of 2 poetry collections. If I Were in a Cage, I'd Reach Out for You, which won the 2017 Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize, and Renaissance Normcore. She is currently working on fiction and creative nonfiction projects. They teach literature and writing at Capilano University. We're so very pleased here at the Fiddlehead to say that Adèle is the winner of the Fiddlehead's 2022 fiction contest. Congratulations, Adèle. Yeah, so tonight Adèle will be reading from their winning story, Here Be Dragons, ISO. What I love about this story is its unusual form, its inventive use of queer dating app vernacular, and the wonderful risk of its main plot point, which that's all I can say for now. So please join me in welcoming Adèle.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited, so delighted to be here through the magic of Zoom. I'm coming to you from unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. And yeah, what a joy to be scooped up all together. So I'll be reading my story. Thank you to the Fiddlehead. Thank you to Judge Chris Benjamin for selecting it. I'm just really, really honored that you all liked my weird queer story. Here Be Dragons, ISO. Dragon uncle down for park hangs with craft beer and hoarding various semi-precious stones and bronze objects. When a man decides to sit next to Danny on an otherwise empty bus during her morning commute to work, she retreats into her phone. She pulls up the queer text-based dating app, indiscriminately anointing each post's Mad Lib's quest for desire with a heart. She is free with her likes, but never replies, mostly due to indifference rather than timidity. She used to want the sun and the moon. Now she wants something more earthly, warm wind, a river, worms and compost, firesider, cedar, buckwheat. When she runs out of posts to grace with distant love, she expands her radius from the city to the entire Milky Way. Stoner Medusa, bring your own shield and sword. At work at the university library, Danny retrieves reserved items from a special room behind the library counter. Anemic grad students request stacks of DVDs, Herzog's Grizzly Man, Lynch's Mulholland Drive, Disney's Sleeping Beauty. For film theory seminars with a scholar renowned for his cruelty and partying with Lou Reed. PhD candidates try to haggle with her for more than 2 days with Levinas's Totality and Infinity, because they cannot annotate the ethical face-to-face encounter with the other in 48 hours. Danny feels pity, but barcodes and post-structuralist professors can't be bargained with. Wayward Octomaid, in search of soul-bearing seances on a budget. At home, Danny taps at the phone screen with a pruned index finger, assigns the personal ad a careless heart, and then uses her toe to pull the plug from her bath. She reaches to set the phone down on top of the closed toilet lid and emerges from tepid water that smells like weedy lavender. The bathroom is silky with mildew. With one foot planted on the bath mat and the other still immersed, Danny towels off. As she wraps a coral towel around her torso, something slimy grazes the back of her heel. She yips and reflexively pulls her leg out of the tub, standing for a moment like a despondent flamingo trawling for brine shrimp. Electricity gathers in her stomach and she shudders. Peering down at the tub, Danny expects to find a sad glob of runaway soap, but instead, there's a tadpole wriggling in the bathtub of her one-bedroom East Van garden suite. A black-green cat eye winking in a grimy yellow tub. The creature resists the drain's current. Danny quickly plugs the whirlpool to stop its riptide from tugging at the small creature. She wants to protect this newly found tiny amphibian because she is sentimental. She also feels the need to atone for all those times she and her sister, as children, trapped tadpoles in buckets with snakes. "What are you doing here, little one?" she asks in the high, croaky voice of someone who hasn't spoken aloud in hours. The tadpole simply shimmies in the dirty bathwater. Danny crouches down to get closer. "Let's get you some fresh water," she coos, and gently turns the cold faucet, coaxing it until a thin stream starts to refill the tub. She dips her other hand into the water to test the temperature. Tadpoles live in ponds, and ponds are usually cool, but not too cold, so she adds warm water too. The tadpole squirms with renewed enthusiasm, which Danny decides is gratitude. There we go. What a little prince you are. She wants to touch the tadpole, to weigh it in her palm and confirm this wriggling mass is real and actually here in her grimy bathroom. But they've only just met. Grabbing a sponge from under the counter, she wipes down the tub's ledge and gets at the grout in the decades-old caulking and tiles framing her basin. Next, she organizes the shower caddy, casting away abandoned shampoo bottles from retired cycles of hair care. She no longer seeks volume or protection from heat damage. She takes care not to fuck with parabens, though she doesn't know why. "I hope this is cozy enough for you." The tadpole swims a lap of the tub. Danny slips her hands into the water. The tadpole stops mid-lap and adjusts its course towards Danny, swimming into her open palms. She lifts cupped hands out of the water, carrying the tadpole closer to her face to peer at the creature with its slick green skin. The tadpole squirming tickles the sensitive skin on her palms, and she smiles before releasing it back into the tub with a small splash. It resumes swimming. After picking up her dirty clothes from the floor, Denny blows out the patchouli-scented candle on her way out of the bathroom. In the dark, The tadpole writhes in its watery cradle. Spider Mama seeks monogamish companion to stitch and bitch. The next day, on break at the library, Danny texts, "Happy birthday," to her friend V. Danny then writes, "It's been too long since I've seen your face. I'm so excited to see you," but then thinks better of it and deletes the second text in favor of a string of emojis that symbolize the occasion: candle, cake, lion, sparkling heart, mountain, cheese. V replies with a slew of purple hearts and shooting stars. She then wanders the enumerated stacks primed to conduct research on her tadpole and learn how to best care for the fellow residing in her bathtub. Her searches drag up monographs titled "Liminal Amphibians, the Aquatics of Dance," "Other Amphibious Others," "Beyond the Pond, Transatlantic Frog Imagery in the Poetry of Elizabeth Bishop." Unfortunately, she works at an academic library that specializes in the social sciences, humanities, and arts. She consults Google and with its oracular wisdom determines she can get away with feeding the tadpole flakes intended for goldfish. Kinky Kraken, adept at shibari and sea shanties. Fish food looks like crushed cornflakes and smells like canned shrimp. A few flakes float on the surface of the water, and others sink in a slow, burlesque sway to the bottom of the tub. Danny infuses care into each flake she proffers. "Come on, I bet you're hungry," she whispers. The tadpole wriggles forward, emerging from under the shower curtain's shadow. "You'll like it, I promise." A dark ball of mucus with a spindly tail, the tadpole glides over the sinking flakes until they disappear. "Good job, baby." Danny sprinkles more flakes into the tub and watches the tadpole feed, entranced by its Pac-Man-like agility underwater. "Okay, pal, it's time for Mama to get clean. I've got a party to get shiny for." Scooping the tadpole into a large beer stein and setting it on the counter, she regrets leaving the pet store without an aquarium. All the expensive tanks illuminating the aisles like endless neon storefronts made her woozy and indecisive. She has cared for cats, hamsters, and rats owned by punk roommates and ex-lovers, but building an aquatic ecosystem feels out of her league. Plus, she wasn't up for carting a cumbersome tank home on the bus. She'll do more research. Her new little friend deserves a proper home, something more than a grubby bathtub. Danny steps into the shower, and after a quick hot rinse, she pushes aside the curtain and exits the tub. It takes a moment, but when she locks eyes on her tadpole in its stein on the counter, she notices it has radically changed. Holy fuck. She retreats back into the safety of the shower stall. The tadpole has grown. A lot. It's not that the tadpole's evolved closer to its final frog form. There aren't any chicken wing legs jutting out. Rather, it's still its mucky globular self, but much bigger, about the size of a softball. Its flesh squishes against the edges of the stein and oozes over the rim. Its tail whips back and forth, frantically trapped in the glass. Naked and dripping, Danny approaches the stein and pokes the tadpole's gummy skin, suppressing a retch in her throat. The baby frog is firm emerald jello. With each twitch of its tail, it begs to be released from its glass pen. She tips the hefty, gelatinous creature from the stein into the remnants of her bathwater with haste. A suctioned pop, and the amphibian plunges back into the tub, where it writhes, content and free. Denny stares at the grapefruit-sized monster casually swimming laps around the bath. The air dries her hair while she gawks. Pride sidles up to her repulsion. Her gross little darling truly is growing up. "I guess you're a thick babe. I can't fault you for that." She shakes a few more helpings of fish flakes into the tub. Thank you, and that's it for now.
Thank you, Adele. That was really lovely. If you didn't hear transatlantic frog imagery in the poetry of Elizabeth Bishop, got a big shout out from the Fiddlehead community. So thank you for including that line for us. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece and I recommend reading the rest for everyone else. Okay, next up, we have Tazi Rodrigues. Tazi is a writer and master's student in biology who studies movement and fresh water in both disciplines. A second-generation settler from Winnipeg, she is currently based in Kingston, Ontario. Her Lighthouse Island chapbook, I Followed the Coasts, was published by Jack Pine Press in 2021. What I loved about Tazi's lovely hybrid lyric essay in this issue of the Fiddlehead is its complex and sensitive engagement with the language of science, gradually exposed as its own supple poetics, which I'm sure you'll hear. Please join me in welcoming Tazi.
Thank you. Thank you to the Fiddlehead for having me, and thank you for being here. It's been amazing so far. I'm going to read from the essay that I have in the winter issue, which is in 30 numbered sections. I won't read all, and they alternate between verse and prose. Lunar cycle and drought. 1. Drought licks the last drop of water from the back of your throat, draws rivers out of you, loops the creek around its body and replaces your bloodstream with sand. Drought leaves rings against your bones, each new season pulling downward, each new flood cresting slightly lower than the last. Count the years by how many feet the lake drops. Count the days by drops evaporating off your toes. Late July and the water catches Perseids, skips them stone-like back into the night. We pull the whole moon egg inside. 2. The lab sets its own circadian rhythms, maintains a steady 23 degrees Celsius through heat waves and cold flashes. Last night, the world burned 35 degrees and fire. We scooped smoke from the air like thick cream, heavy against us, and reached clumsily for the moon. This afternoon, we pipette 300 microliters of water into each divot of 9 well plates and transfer fathead minnow eggs one by one in lab lighting that flickers fluorescent. Each plate has 24 little wells, depressions in the plastic casing, in a design that's often used for toxicity studies. In our case, each holds a tiny minnow egg. Because the eggs die at the slightest inconvenience, the lab is sealed by duct tape and black garbage bags that keep everything constant. 3. Sink your teeth into the lake, rows of molars anchors in the silt. Bury your body collarbone deep in the mud. We've been waiting for rain. Is it this that we've been looking for? The slip of periphyton against your calves, the slice of cold water the lake won't let go. When you dive, does it sound anything like thunder? 4. Our well plates hold onto the light bulb's glimmer, turning up reflections as we move across them and pipette each egg over, round forms settling into new space. We watch the tails flip, life push against the rims. The minnow embryos aren't eyed up yet, but we can make out some organs through their transparent membranes. Yesterday, I gathered benthic invertebrate traps from the lake bottom at dawn and poured the contents into buckets between the narrow benches of the boat. Its silver gunnel flashed with threads of sunrise that cascaded down the metal sides of the small, open-backed hull. In one trap, baited with a round white LED, we found 4 adult salamanders with their tails pressed tight into each other. At breakfast in the research facility dining hall, I asked each person what it would take to make them squeeze into a trap, as if I didn't already know the easy pull of the moon. 5. The moon used to pull tides. Now it pulls us, ribs first, down to the edge of the lake, fills our peeled back bodies with light, though we thirst instead for water. Creeks run thick as creamy smoke, their current suddenly turned silt. Did you see the sunrise out on the lake, clouds doused in orange? Did you hear the whir of water bombers, yellow flanks pressed to forest, the fire loose around the edges? 6. Before I worked on the lake, I worked in the living room of a third-floor apartment in Winnipeg where the moon squinted in sharp as glass. Before the drought, there was the first weary pandemic winter when I burrowed into a borrowed orange couch and drew lake contours with code for months. Before we knew we wouldn't see each other until spring, a friend sent me a message. Are you an aunt now? Yes. The baby's name is B, and he and my sibling are well. They were discharged 11 days after the full moon, one day before Manitoba's first attempt at a single household lockdown. After I visited the baby, I walked home in the broad darkness of November evening. The streets were muffled by deep snowbanks, plowed despite the lack of traffic, despite the city turning in on itself as it prepared to hibernate. 7. And what of the river? Its shoulders bare, the slip of exposed rock along the shore. Its banks strip tall grass roots like fishing lines, wait days, their careful walls ribbed by candled ice, riparian dogwood crimson in soft light. 8. I saw the baby on Wednesday nights, sleeping or eating or briefly awake on a video call, on my sibling's lap or my mother's. Sometimes I saw them outside, but it was hard to make out the details of a winter-bundled newborn from 6 feet away, his outline draped in a blue knit blanket. I called on other evenings and transitioned from a work meeting on the right side of my couch to a poetry reading or phone date on the left. Darkness sealed my apartment by 5 p.m. When we learned about the baby, my dad said that this was his only chance to be a grandfather. On thin nights in January, this rattled inside me as I made another single serving of spaghetti, my fork clinking against the bowl. I stared out at the stars from my tiny window. I stared at the birds nesting in my neighbor's attic. I tried to fill myself, but found only sand. 9. Sand, silk, silt, slick, creek lies frozen, carries fishes close to cobbled bottom. Above, there's a quiet crunching as you walk in the deep snow, bound by cattail stalks beside each margin of the ice. There's a long whistling of prairie wind, the downy woodpecker's chattered call. 10. On weeks when we don't set light traps, we look for tadpoles. 25 minnow traps and 25 bottle traps around the lake and up to 14 seines in each bay. I hop in and out of the bow at the sampling stations, staking each trap to the rocky bottom with a bright pink flag that hisses in the wind. We set them just before dusk. A frog calls out to the evening from behind the reeds in the part of the lake where my rain boots always flood with water and then sink into the squelch of putrid muck. I don't know how most tadpole species look or sound after they metamorphose onto land, so I describe this call in my field book for identification later. Croaks like vibrations against plastic, monosyllabic. In the morning, the bottle traps are flooded with American toad tadpoles, their collective movement pulsing against the walls. I could easily fit 50 of them in the small palm of my hand. Maybe one will survive to adulthood. 11. When the water dries up, leave skins along the earth, pinched where molds take over the growing, the toads will move upland, gather their eggs and go. There's a puddle on top of the ridge where rain still falls, gleaming, and where the water turns viscid with tadpoles. 12. The baby learned to smile over winter. My family, all living together a 10-minute walk from my apartment, told me he smiled more when he saw me on video calls, but I had nothing to gauge this by. They passed him around and his body softened into theirs. From my bedroom window, I could see the family across the road turn their front yard into a rink and slide makeshift milk jug curling rocks across the ice. Sometimes one of them would retreat briefly inside and return with hot chocolate for everyone. I took 3 weeks off around the solstice. The sun leaked low against the horizon, barely lifting above the houses before dipping down again. At 4:30 each evening, I walked down to the river and watched as day gave way to the moon, trailing ribbons of pink sky. When I arrived home, I poured myself a scalding bath and watched my skin turn the same color. I hadn't been within 6 feet of another person in weeks. 17. In the tadpole boat, everything has to be sterile. Please pass me the swab, plastic wrap partially opened, so that I can pull it out with one gloved hand while the other holds a freshly rinsed amphibian. Collect the sample in a tube. Move the scissors through fire before using them. If the forest is on fire, let's finish the sample and make note of it, for the water quality may have changed. 18. My nephew's first summer chokes on smoke from forest fires like the one that burns near the main lake that I'm studying. Right before field season, we walked to the neighborhood creek and watched a northern leopard frog struggle to swim upstream, his eyes still too young to make out the movement. Instead, he watched the water billow along the creek bed and then spill into the river. This creek typically floods. It doesn't usually spill into the river because both water bodies are high enough to soften into each other at the outflow, the boundaries between them incomplete. In genetic terms, fitness is calculated by the number of offspring you have who survive to sexual maturity. Expecting most eggs to die, amphibians lay hundreds, often in shallow water. Most species provide no parental care. Many fishes don't parent either, but fathead minnows show allopaternal care. Males will protect not only eggs fertilized with their own milk, but also those of others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tazi. Beautiful to hear the work come out in your voice. Okay, so finally, our last reader for the evening is Ellie Sawatzky. Ellie is a Vancouver-based writer, editor, and teacher, a past winner of CV2's Foster Poetry Prize, and a finalist for the 2019 Bronwyn Wallace Award. Her work has been published widely. Her debut poetry collection, None of This Belongs to Me, was published by Nightwood Editions in 2021. What I personally admired about Ellie's poems in this issue is their ability to draw us into their strange intimacies, to sit at the kitchen table with the poet, beholding the milk pooling in plastic and the fat slump of the moon. Please join me in welcoming Ellie.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Gosh, it will never stop being weird to read poems to a bunch of blinking cubes on my computer screen. Thank you so much for being here. You're beautiful cubes. And thank you to the Fiddlehead for putting together this event and for inviting me. I'm very honored. And I also just want to take a moment to appreciate that it's a kind of magic that I can essentially teleport from one coast to the other for a poetry reading. Technology these days can be really overwhelming, but it's also really amazing. And it's still daylight in Vancouver, where I'm coming from, which is a miracle in and of itself. So I'm going to read my 3 poems from the issue. They're kind of a funny trio of poems, and I'm very glad that they found a home together in the Fiddlehead. Does anyone else ever think of their pieces or their poems as being each other's siblings? It's really nice when they get to be together. This first poem is called Desire Paths, and what I want to say about this poem is that sometimes you write a poem and it's confessional and it's kind of embarrassing and you don't really think about other people reading it. And then you send it out for publication and it gets accepted. And then the lovely publication asks you to read it to other people at a reading. And you have to confront your own awkwardness. And it's really fun. So that's this poem, Desire Paths. This morning I shit in the woods, pursued a path off deer fern to where a throne of good wood stood illuminated by the sun. Twists of tissue like wilted thimbleberry blossoms flung at the feet of a queen. I thought of you as I unspooled myself into the earth. Shame and worship in one breath, in my sameness with everything. Distant craftscapes of traffic, different destinations. What if we only went where we wanted to? Winding back in my mind to when night's black flagged at the window, and you and I followed old roads into each other, still came out someplace new. This next poem is called Babies. 3 days with my half-sister and her new twins, and I'm attuned only to babies. The steamer screaming in the cafe, fat slump of the moon. Tonight, my half-sister pumps breast milk at the kitchen table, tells me about her early years with her mom. There's a lot I didn't know. A stepdad named Ken, a velvet dog that drowned. We've never talked like this. Sisterhood, a lattice for wild roses, durable enough, we hope, to withstand mountain weather. She and I were babies together, lumbering along parallel lines until we were split by love's silent asymmetry. Taller and sadder than me, she became a ballerina, a stranger in stills from Swan Lake, sent by mail, an only child who assumed the silhouette of sister at midnight. We don't talk about my dad, our dad, but he's a clumsy shape between us, texting me from Ontario to say he saw a lone swan coast over the house and land so smooth it scarcely worried the surface of the water. The light at my half-sister's kitchen window is a convolution of blues. I watch the milk pool in plastic. No, she doesn't wish to feed her children grief, but where does it go? I boil linguine and we eat hazardously, trading babies. It seems there are more than two babies on the table, the piano, the walls pink and breathing. Night falls, a curtain of babies swinging past the window. It's eerie, the way they look at you, eyes the non-color of a bottomless lake or a storm that won't settle. They rattle us, heave us at our roots. There are so many babies, so many versions of a story, I believe. The last poem that I'm going to read is called Dinner Party, and it was written from a prompt. And the prompt was to write an imaginary dinner party with different people from throughout your life. And when you're a person who experiences issues around food, for me, it's IBS and chronic digestive issues. And so dinner parties are kind of a tricky space. Or at least they have been in my experience. And so I wrote my imagined dinner party, and it became a poem about trying to heal my relationship with my body and the things, the people, and the memories that live inside my body. Dinner party. In the dream where my body is a house, my dining room is hectic with guests, hard shapes I haven't been able to digest. I've made pesto from nettle, harvested by my best friend. She's here, spooning the green sauce over gluten-free gnocchi. Someone has poured the wine. I am tinkling my dessert fork against a glass for the toast. Taylor Swift jokingly leans in to kiss my childhood dog. My ex checks his mustache in the blade of a knife. Someone else, a stranger closest to me, looks anxious. How do we embody our desire to survive? By smiling when it hurts? I try too hard not to splash Shiraz on the white doilies of my neurons, inhibitory and excitatory synapses crashing. Some inherited code, scared foremothers breathing behind my genetic drapery. Being a good hostess synonymous with staying alive. What are we toasting to? Taylor asks, her glass like a butterfly around her bright lips. The dog licks his empty plate and my ex sneezes. He's allergic to animals. I almost say bless you. The stranger scoots her chair a little closer to mine. I think I know her from my hometown. Why isn't my mother here? Everyone looks at me, waits for me, and for a moment it's silent except for the whisper of a candle I lit years ago when I moved in alone. In the country of my subconscious, I see the home I've made, its good bones, the faces of its memories upturned like they're about to sing something for me. Whenever I'm ready, whenever I give them my blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellie. Wonderful, wonderful glimpse of your life and your work and all those spooky babies. I had some of those once. Cody, do you want to come up and we can do the Q&A?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Or do you want to sit there? Yeah, come on up there. Okay, so does anybody have questions for Cody and our online people? I don't know if there already are in the chat, but I guess I'll privilege the room.
There are none in the chat
Okay,
yet,
Okay,
but
thank
I'll let
you.
you know.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we've got one from Fawn. Yeah.
I had a question for Cody, which was, sorry.
Okay.
When you're writing in such a strong voice, like in that piece, for that excerpt, do you find that you plot out the same way as when you're writing in maybe your more natural voice, or do you write and the voice takes it away and the story forms that way?
Definitely number two, for sure, yeah. I always try to listen to the story as best as I can, and that particular excerpt is from a pastiche of memories that exist in my own world, and then from friends and sort of just the like eavesdropping of your childhood, consistently trying to pull out little moments that make sense. I went to a compound like that once as a kid and snuck in with a friend, but the character is very much not me.
Wonderful. Yeah. Did I see you, Sue? Yeah.
Yep.
Sue has a question in the back. Yeah.
I would like to ask about tadpoles. It struck me, even as Adele started reading, the tadpoles are not the most obviously lovable animal, not having the fur, with the large eyes, and as Adele continued reading, the tadpole got a little grosser. Dark ball of mucus with spindly tail, I wrote down. And yet I feel like both Adele and Tazi, you're portraying the tadpoles with a lot of sympathy and care. And Tazi, in your essay, we get the tadpoles kind of growing and giving birth and so on, sort of alongside their human counterparts. So I wondered if either or both of you could talk a bit about how you approached writing about tadpoles and the hows and whys of writing with such sympathy for these peculiar creatures.
I can dive in. I mean, I don't think I'm as acquainted with tadpoles as in reality as Tazi is, but the appeal of the tadpole for me is precisely because it's a little squicky, but not so much that you'll I think people have seem to across the board have a pretty intense fear of snakes and stuff like that. I think tadpoles, they're squicky, but we're drawn to them. Children really love to play with them and catch them. It has that kind of childlike playful connotation that I was curious about. And also, I don't know, as the story progresses, there's kind of, this kind of exploration of intimacy and attachment and what it means to engage with those squicky, monstrous, ugly, uncomfortable parts of ourselves. And yeah, extending care to our monstrosity and our freakiness. So I thought the tadpole that gets bigger and bigger would be a fun way to test that, how much care can you extend to this globular mucusy thing hanging out in your bathtub.
I have a very practical answer, which is that the summer right before I wrote this essay, I was catching tadpoles as a job and looking for them, maybe more than catching them. And so as the essay came together, that seemed to be what to write about. But later it was pointed out to me that my nephew is perhaps tadpole-like, in that he has a lot of metamorphosis in front of him. And I do like that play. Yeah, but ultimately, it was just because I was on a boat looking for tadpoles for a long time and thinking about also changes going on in my own life and in the world in that 2020, 2021 period.
Lovely. Yeah, that's really well said. I was also struck by the relationship between the babies and the tadpoles in the sense that, like, I don't know if you ever looked at, if anyone here has ever looked at the app, What to Expect When You're Expecting. But the baby has a really, like the embryo begins as this very sort of, it has a vestigial tail. That's all I'm really going for there. Yeah, so it's quite a connection there. And even in Adele's story, there was that line about atonement really struck me. Actually, the desire to atone. Many of us who have like messed with amphibians at some point in our lives, that's like a rite of passage or something, right? There's sort of a subconscious return of the tadpole here happening. Other questions from the room or the online community?
Question for Ellie.
Okay, sure. Yeah, lovely. Emily.
Ellie, you just mentioned something about your poems being siblings, and it made me think of, do you notice, like, in terms of like age ranges between these siblings, like, will you like write a poem and then maybe several years later write another one and then realize, oh, like that one's a sibling to this one, or do they kind of all come out in a sequence? Or yeah, just talk some more about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think I do group them, but I honestly haven't thought about it that much until now. So I don't really know how I group them, but these three I wrote around the same time. So maybe it has more to do with age than content. I think it has more to do with the time that they were birthed from me. And that's kind of how I group them. So these ones were written kind of within a couple of months of each other. And I think in my mind, that's how it works. So they're like in my mind, now that they're placed together in this issue of the Fiddlehead, they are triplets. But definitely when I was putting together my first collection of poetry, the thing that I struggle most with, the thing that I struggled most with at that time was figuring out how to put my poems together in some kind of a sequence. And because I think of them all as being kind of individuals, and they are kind of related to each other in ways, but it's hard for me to see those ways. It's hard for me to see the overarching narrative of my body of work. So yeah, so now I kind of think of them differently. Now that my older poems that are published in my book, I think of them as being part of the sections that they were grouped into, and so it's kind of an evolving thing.
Yes, absolutely. Question from Ross Leck.
Yeah, Ellie, I really like your poem Dinner Party. And it struck me that, speaking of siblings, it seemed like that kind of imaginative space could produce almost like a sequence of poems. Have you ever thought of taking that kind of dinner party idea and expanding it into different contexts?
I hadn't thought of that, but that's a great idea.
and very quickly, you said it was prompted by exercise of people you've known in your life. So are you a friend of Taylor Swift?
It's not people that I necessarily know. But like there's that question that's like, who would be at your imaginary dinner party? Like who from like what famous people from history would be at your dinner party? So the prompt was, prompts have no rules. They're really just to get the ball rolling. But the prompt was, I think it was meant to be people that you know in your life. And then I turned it into something else because I just really wanted Taylor Swift to be in my poem. I don't know why. I just wanted to.
Other comments on Taylor Swift? Taylor Swift related questions? Instagram? Yeah, Sue.
A question for Cody about names.
Yeah.
Bear and goose. Seems kind of childlike, like it could be like a kid's story with characters named Bear and Goose. So there's something kind of endearing about it, and the names have got a quality of nicknames, so it feels like there's a little intimacy there. There's also a way in which the names Bear and Goose feel a little like a mask, like there's something else behind these characters that I'm not accessing. So that's what I was just thinking through, experiencing these characters with these names. But can you talk about how you chose the names or why those names came to you? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. I like when people have really good, I like good names, and I've met people named Bear. Like, you know, Bear is a common name for certain communities, and I thought of a few friends growing up, and they're sort of the avatars before them. You know, they had certain names, but they were very much certain kind of figures, and I've always liked that name Bear. I had a dog named Bear when I was a kid. I think there's some. Someone has a dog named Bear. I'm in this vicinity. I can't remember who it is, but Goose was kind of a. Right now on my MacBook, my background is a picture of a Canadian goose off Google Images, and I just like I really like, you know, when I was a kid, I liked this band, and their mascot was a pigeon, and they did that sort of openly because collectively people don't like pigeons. They're kind of like a nuisance, and I always thought that was really interesting that they subverted that and use an animal. And I just arbitrarily kind of liked those names. It was during COVID. Matilda and I both had COVID in 2021, December, and I was like playing a game or something, and I just thought of two close friends and them having those names, and it just, I guess they kind of just stuck it. Yeah, Goose is the character's name is Gustave, Portuguese name, Brazilian name too, and I just thought Goose was like a nice tongue-in-cheek, like Canadian riff off that, because you know, you don't want to be called Gustave if you're in the 9th grade. It's super cringe. So, and he becomes friends with Bear, and I thought that the masking or the avatars of animals was super funny, and like there's a lot of play there, because, you know, if he's a bear, like he doesn't always act like a bear. You know, we associate bear with like fear and strength and a certain demeanor. You know, you see a bear run or whatever. In many ways he is that, but in many ways he isn't. And in many ways, what does a goose symbolize collectively? And how do we imagine in our consciousness as people what a goose is or isn't? And you know, geese, they hiss. I think that's so interesting and bizarre as like an attribute and a verb even, that a geese can hiss at someone. And how would this goose in particular, this person, hiss in response to things that have happened to him? So always thinking about that play. I think all the writers in the room and all the writers there we're constantly like geeking out about that. And one more thing I'll say is that just a writer I know, he passed away, was one of the first cool writers I knew in my undergrad. And he always named the characters in his creative nonfiction funny names. And I always thought that was super interesting that he did that. And didn't just name them like mom and dad or whatever. He always gave them like super funny, idiosyncratic, delightful names. So, and naming is super important too, you know? So hope that answers.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, that was a very robust and thoughtful answer for that question. That's a great question as well. Naming your characters. Yeah, so looks like, do we have some questions in the Zoom chat or?
No, I'm trying to encourage people to ask questions, but nobody has taken up our offer.
Well,
There
it's
is
8
one that
p.m.
I see for
Yeah.
Tazi.
Oh, okay. Yes, there we go. So John, would you like to ask it yourself, or do you want me to ask it? You can unmute.
Sure, yeah. That's good. Tazi, I was really fascinated by establishing such a clear structure, but then also kind of being willing to play with that as the poem goes on. And so I'm curious to hear more about how you came to that structure that you have now, kind of throughout the writing process and throughout the life of this piece.
That is a very good question. And if anybody has a repeatable way of finding a structure for an essay, please let me know. I had these fragments, various fragments, some of which ended up being in the essay, some of which weren't in the end. And I couldn't figure out what was going on with them. This is also one of the first and one of the only full essays that I've written, and whether or not it's an essay is questionable. It may be a long poem. But initially I was thinking of these fragments as like, can this become a long poem that would be fully in verse, instead of the structure that I have now of alternating? And it wasn't really working. And I also didn't really know what it was about. And I kind of kept having ideas. So it started with like kind of this egg in the well plate and moon combination. And then I was wondering, like, can I throw climate change into this? Can I throw like becoming an ant in this? Can I talk about a pandemic? Can I talk about like everything that I'm currently thinking about? And I think the answer ended up being yes, but I don't really know what happened between having little fragments that I didn't know what to do. Although I do know that practically I was sitting in a writing group that I was part of for a while. And I don't know what we were discussing, but I just suddenly realized, oh, it's a poem and then a paragraph and then verse and then a paragraph, and that's how it has to go. And then I wrote it fairly linearly like that, although there were chunks that were added, or sometimes I would not want to write in prose and I would skip it, or I would not have poetry, more verse to write at that moment and I would skip it. But I think it worked well for me as mostly a poet trying to write more essays. And I think I needed the prose to bring in a lot of contextual information, both in terms of my life and scientific. So I really like it, but I have no idea what to do in my next essay. We'll see what structure happens there.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we all think the structure is totally beautiful. So congrats on that. And I hope you can find, finding the structure. Yeah, I don't think that's supposed to be easy, right? Yeah, okay. So it is now 8:03 p.m., which I believe it means it's basically the thanking hour of this event. So I'd like to thank everyone. Thanks very much to all our authors, Cody, all of our authors online as well. Just give them one final. Thanks for sharing all your beautiful work with us this evening. So yeah, I'd like to thank Emily Nielsen and Ian Letourneau, our beloved Fiddlehead team, who are very instrumental in putting this event together and are always instrumental in the running of this journal. I'd like to just give a shout out to the fellow contributors that are in the room, and to our Fiddlehead writers, past and present, and our readers as well. Those are pretty essential too. So thank you all, and I wish you all a lovely evening and safe travels.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to meet you.
It was wonderful to meet you.
Ready on.
Great.
Tea, coffee, and some cookies. Bye.
Yes, feel free to
Farewell.
unmute and chat.
We'll have to go find our own cookies.
Yes, that's right.
I'm sure there's cookies out there in the world.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. It's
Yes.
wonderful to do this. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad we're able to
That's
do
great.
this virtually.
Yes, no, that's
Yeah.
great.
Really great.
Yeah.
Wonderful readings.
All the work actually was really complimentary
Yeah.
as well. There were some nice overlapping themes.
I was
and-
hoping Ellie would have a tadpole pop up in one of her poems.
Yeah, that's right. Now
Where
they're
were the
going to be
babies?
I was hoping that
tadpoles and
too. Babies, but no tadpoles. Birds and babies.
Tadpoles at the dinner party. That sounds.
We went
Ah.
A dinner party sounds productive to me for the next dinner party poem. Yeah. Then
I'm
we
gonna
all
work
meet
on
after.
that.
That does sound like a good prompt. Yeah, I like that.
So help me be inspired to write.
Yeah.
It's almost like Ross Lecky is a teacher and an editor. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, and they have to have interesting names too, just to, keep this.
Yes. That's Cody's piece.
Yeah.
The name.
I should have said that Taylor Swift was my half sister from the other poem.
Oh, right, yeah.
Or maybe that was your tadpole's name.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to future encounters.
Farewell.
Thank you. Thank you to the interpreters.
Thank you so much.
That's wonderful.
Joanne. Thank you so much, Joanne.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Thank you, Joanne.
You're very welcome. I love doing this.
Really? I was 16, but
Yeah,
it felt like there was 20. And one of my counts was that way, but I think I counted people twice.
Okay.
It was great.